Hello, people. Welcome to another edition of A Dose of Drew. And today is Sunday Sharpings. And we're going to be talking about the difference between constant and consistent angles. And by angles, I mean this angle here. If this is your stone or this is your blade, if it's your stone, like say in a hand sharpening, or the blade in a system such as the work sharp, right? Where your blade is that peak and this is the swing arm, the single swing arm, so it goes here. And then we'll talk about like how it matches where that blade hits in an arc. Okay, so that's what those little drawings represent. And we'll talk about how those are different. First of all, I want to talk about constant angle. That's where this angle right here stays the same. In order for this to stay the same in something like a work sharp, this stays the same while you're sharpening. So the only place that's the same distance is that arc, right? These lines are all the same length and all that. So that's where that distance is the same. So that's the only line where the angle is constant, okay? So if you have something like, say, this Kaiser Clairvoyant, that arc is really close. Right, and this is just this arc that came about, like say, this is just close to saying, but it's just constant. Let's just say that arc is really close, that belly is really close to the arc produced by, say the work sharp. That means it's going to have a pretty constant angle. It's going to be very consistent and constant, right? So it goes through. Now, if you have something that is much more like, say, a drop point like the Mordax, you're going to have a consistent angle, but not a constant one. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that in some parts it's going to be a little bit further out from the arc, and in other places it's going to be a little bit further in. Further out, right here, means that you have something that, say, like, is trying to go right there, and then all of a sudden you need it to go further out. In order for it to come in, you've got to change this angle, and that makes this less steep. So if this is 17 degrees now, this is like, say, 16. And if it comes in, it's going to make this drop down a little bit. So instead of, let's say, 17, now it's going to be like, say, 18 or 20. It's not that much, but let's say it's 18 degrees. So it's going to come in, and while it's going to be consistent from one side to the next because it's symmetric, it's not going to be a constant angle unless it follows that arc. Now, this is true of every single swing arm system. I don't care if it's the TS Prof, I don't care if it's work sharp, KME, any single swing arm system has this problem. Or benefit, depends on how you look at it. This is the geometry that they have to do. It doesn't matter if it's something that's straight, right? Where you put it in the thing, this is going to be a thinner angle. This is going to be a stouter angle. Same thing, right? So there's plenty of bits there. And so you'll get, on something like a drop point, this may or may not be a benefit to you, right? It's slicier back here, and then it gets stouter at the tip. So let's say this is a 16-degree angle, and this is an 18-degree angle. That's actually not about, it'll be the same thing, and it'll seamlessly go in in just an arc that goes from a shallower angle to a steeper angle. That's going to make it a bit stouter at the tip and a bit slicier at the back, and that's not necessarily a bad way to sharpen. In fact, it's a very difficult way to sharpen by hand. But it does produce a consistent angle that goes from, like, say, a 16 to an 18. And I'm just throwing out numbers on there, right? So that's why you'll see something like a drop point that's different. Whereas on something like the reek I just had out here, this sort of Warncliffy, it's going to be steepest right here, and then out here and out here, it's going to get slicier. Now, the radius does matter, because the bigger that arc is, the flat or a small piece of it looks, right? So you have a really big arc, a little tiny piece of it that would be a knife blade that gets closer and closer to flat, okay? So bigger radius, like on a TS Prof or something where it goes, but it only matters, it doesn't matter just how long the swing arm is, that gives you stroke, right? That stroke across this one little spot. It matters how far away where that knife edge is from the pivot point, from that fulcrum point. That's really the only measurement. This and this are the only measurements. The rest is made by those. So there's really no solid way around it when it comes to that. What you get is something like on Tormex, where instead of a single swing arm, you have a double swing arm where it goes and then it locks and it turns. So if you can see that, and then it comes in, right? Turns, and then you can flip that over and it does anything, turns. So you go, and then a little smaller swing arm lifts it up so that where this is stays at that angle, and then you move it in. And you'll see like other ones that have a grinding things. A lot of other places where they have grinding wheels will have some sort of swing arm and they're usually custom built per blade, right? It has this much travel and then it arcs, right? This much travel and arcs, right? So that helps you get a constant angle across an entire blade shape. And I'm definitely going to use this drop point a lot because it's very convenient for showing. And that's the same thing you get, if you have something, again, like this clairvoyant that's really close, or actually, it probably is closer to even closer to matching the work sharp arc. Or if you want to, it's just a single arc, right? You're just moving it, whether by hand or this thing is beautiful to sharpen, just like a Warncliffe is by hand as well. It's the compound angles that really get you. And your arm does the same thing as the two swing arm system, like a Tormek or something would have, right? Your arm does the same thing. You're coming down, and then you wing it, right? You're locking your wrist. Everything's essentially at the shoulder and elbow. You're coming down, and then you wing it out, right? Wing it out, wing it in, and then straight, and then same thing. That's your arm does that, and you can change your radius, right? I can pivot right here, or I can pivot right here. So you can change the radius of that pivot just sort of naturally. So your arm gets this really big, right? It gets this incredibly large arc, and you can do the double arc and stuff like that. So you can actually do a fairly constant angle with your arm. There's a lot of people who would prefer that, because a constant angle keeps a consistent secondary bevel width, which looks really nice when you have everything that's all the same height and blah, blah, blah. It looks really good, right? And especially if you're doing things like polish edges and whatnot. But that's the basics behind there. So we get to the armrest. Now, I saved a special kind for last because this is one that you need special stuff for, and that's when you have something like a recurve. So now you've got something that goes in as well as, or it goes in a couple times as well as comes out. Like you can put it right there. Now you've got out, up to a thing, out, and then in again. This is really hard to do with a square swing arm, okay? You get things like this, and it just covers the entire arc. So what you really need is something that's curved. Something that instead of flat on the coated surface has a curve to it. And then that curve intersects this blade in one spot. And you can turn it a little bit to get different angles. And you can get in and get a recurve. That's one thing that the square things like Work Sharp or even TS Prof, anything that doesn't have a curved surface to it, isn't going to really get into there very well. Now you can do it by twisting it up on its edge and making a single line, but then you really wear down the edges of your stuff. So you can do it with the recurve. You won't have a constant angle, but again, you'll have a consistent angle from one side to the other. But to really get a good, you'll need a curved diamond plated surface for any, or even if you have like the aluminum oxide stones, you'll need a curved surface to do so. So it does kind of some special treatment for the recurves will need to go in there, just so you'll need something like a curved surface. That's really where I want to go, because that's something like a Mordax. You'll get a consistent edge of differing angles from one side to the next, but it won't be a constant angle. It won't be the same angle right here, right? It won't be that same angle all the way through. It'll be slightly different at the tip than from the base, from the heel. Unless you have something that completely matches or just really closes the arc, like this Kaiser Clairvoyant, that will sharpen very nicely at a consistent as well as constant angle. Right? That'll be almost, if it matches the arc, it will be a constant angle. If it just gets really close, it'll be hardly measurable. So that's really where it comes from. So you got things like the single swing arm for just about every sharpener out there where you have a fixed blade and then a stroking swing arm. They all have that same issue. If you have something like a Tormek that you can have custom little double swing arms, that is fantastic. But really the one that gets you in the end is either a machine that keeps the blade in one place and follows the blade arc, or you have your arm where you have that double swing arm that allows you to get lots and lots of adjustment just through your own kinetic movement. So there we go. Constant versus consistent angles and sharpening systems, so that when you use it, you know what to expect. Having a consistent in a non-constant, but consistent may be what somebody likes. You may have never thought about it, but you're always going to be reprofiling when you have something like a work sharp or a swing arm system, because most factories do a constant angle where they have a grinder that goes and follows at a constant angle, and then when you use the swing arm, you reprofile, right, with a consistent but differential angle. 18 here, 16 here, or sorry, 16 here and 18 here, right? So you have a slightly stouter tip with a slightly slicier, belly or flat. That's not necessarily bad, and it's really hard to do with your arm, right? To make a constant 2-degree change through multiple stones that doesn't change. Like you do it the same way as you go through different grits and everything like that. That's something a swing arm does really, really well. It's a consistent angle. You'll have a consistent edge all the way around, but you're very unlikely, especially with something like a drop point, to have a constant angle from here to here. It just has a really hard time doing it because of the inherent geometry and limitations of that geometric design. So again, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Just be aware that that's what it does. That's what something like a Work Sharp or a TS Prof or whatever does. There is a consistent angle, but it's not constant across the face of the blade, unless you just happen to have an arc that's really close to what that natural arc is anyway. So I hope that answers some questions about constant and consistent. I wanted to get all these out before I did my review on any sharpening systems or did any hand sharpening videos. So when I talk about things like constant versus consistent angle, you have these videos to reference. So there you go. Constant versus consistent angles and how it matters on different systems. There's some of the last of the Sunday sharpening background videos. So I'll end it. Go ahead, take this video, watch it twice, comment as much as you like, be mindful of side effects. Remember to like and subscribe. This has been your dose of Drew. I am said Drew. You guys have a great rest of your night.